Speaking of AEW, they were not without controversy of their own this week, much of it of their president's own making. Big Swole and Tony Khan. We have to talk about this situation, and I addressed it on Friday night, actually during the New Year's Eve stream, because this literally all went down and broke on social media about, 2 hours or so, 2-3 hours before I went live. And, it's a touchy subject. It deals with issues of race and diversity, but it's not just a race thing. I mean, there was a lot to unpack with what Big Swole talked about on her show. So Big Swole announced on November 30th that she and AEW had mutually parted ways. And Big Swole has a podcast of her own called Swole World. Was not aware of this until a few days ago. And she talked about the decision to mutually part ways with AEW. And this is courtesy of Fightful.com. She talked about the most emotional moment that she had in AEW was when Kenny Omega thanked her for what she did in the Diamante feud, and how it made other women in the company more comfortable to pitch ideas behind the scenes. And she said that she explained to Tony Khan that I didn't want to re-sign because my peace was being disrupted. If anybody knows me, if anything is disrupting your peace, it's time to let it go. And the stuff with Kenny is interesting because she also talked about butting heads with him and having issues with him before behind the scenes, maybe creative differences, I don't know. But she said, my heart just stopped being in it as the reason why I left AEW. I felt like there were a lot of things, and I told them in my exit interview there were a lot of things that need to change. I know fans of the company don't take criticism well sometimes. Certain ones. You don't say. By the way, that applies to both sides, WWE and AEW. I encounter them on a daily basis. On an hourly basis, I see and hear from these very same people. You say the slightest thing out of turn about either product and they lose their fucking minds because they are they're out of their own minds. They don't have a mind to lose. So I can relate to that. But she says, know this from somebody on the inside. The structure is a little off. It's fine to be loose, but I like to have a little bit more structure. I felt like the women should not have gone through everything they went through just to get on TV or get time. You're signed to this big company, you should get time. All these men are getting time, but the women were not getting anything, or you're not putting people on TV because more people are coming in. Okay, there are more people coming in, but you don't have enough product for all of these people. Now you have all these people sitting around having 2 or 3 minute matches on Dark, and that doesn't keep me happy. Shoveling more money does not keep a person happy. And that's another criticism that we have heard. And AEW is still bringing in new faces every month. We just had Kyle O'Reilly make his debut. There's still a lot of talk about maybe Johnny Gargano. Maybe Bray Wyatt at some point this year makes his way in. Other talent. I mean, maybe that forbidden door cracks open a little bit more. We see more New Japan names come over and make appearances on AEW television. And, we've talked about how that has to be frustrating, and at some point, it's going to reach a boiling point. You're going to have people who want to leave. Instead of it being a one-way street where people leave WWE and go to AEW, you will have AEW people that eventually leave and end up going over to the other side. Because they also are very frustrated about sitting around and catering and sitting around and not having anything to do or going out there and having 2-minute matches on the YouTube show. You can understand why that would be frustrating to people. But she said outside of the lack of structure, their biggest issue is diversity. I don't beat around the bush when it comes to diversity and my people. There is no representation, truly, and when there is, it does not come across in the black community as genuine at all. I don't know why anybody is so afraid to accept it or say it, but that is not a good look. I knew something was up when my daughter, who loves watching wrestling, when she made the comment to Big Swole that when she watches AEW, she doesn't see anybody who looks like her. There's nobody that looks like Daddy. Daddy is Cedric Alexander, for those who don't know. Then she started watching WWE because she saw Bianca and Big E. She saw herself represented. If that wasn't a click, you are absolutely right. I don't have an explanation. It's 2021. Why are people saying it'll take 3 years for AEW to have a black champion? This is a scripted sport. It should not take that long if you have been watching WWE for 50 years. So it sounds like there what she's kind of getting into is the idea that she's upset there's no black world champion in AEW. I guess either with the women or the men. Now you're getting into the issue of this issue of diversity or a lack thereof that some people think exists in AEW, and clearly that is what ruffled the feathers of Tony Khan. And there's more to what she said. I'm not going to read all of it, but she made it a point that diversity is an issue in AEW in her mind. And the stuff with Kenny Omega, her issue was the women's division sort of fell by the wayside when Kenny Omega was really starting to get busy working on his own stuff. And she talked about the female talent only, again, wrestling 2-minute matches on Dark with inexperienced young talent. She said at one point she was taken aside by somebody and asked to be a sheriff of sorts in the division and handle any issues that may come up. She says that she and others made suggestions to try to make the division better, like training camps and guest instructors. Many in the division would pitch storylines and wouldn't get any feedback. And so that caused a lot of frustration as well. Tony Khan, though, chimed in on this. He couldn't let sleeping dogs lie. He had to respond. And Tony Khan wins for sad tweet this week. He saw the Fightful write-up on Big Swole's comments, and he quote tweeted their tweet with one of his own. This was only a few hours before their big New Year's Eve edition of Rampage. I heard a lot of great things about the women's match on that show with Ty Conti and Anna Jay against the Bunny and Penelope Ford, and there was a Cody TNT title match. So he didn't have to say anything about this on New Year's Eve. He could have left it alone and responded in a different way on a different day. But he couldn't help himself. And he went and... Now Fightful, I should mention, Fightful reported previously that AEW are the ones who did not renew Big Swole's deal. She paints it as this mutual decision. I didn't want to stay, and I let them know about my decision. But, you read this, and it's almost as if she made the call to leave. And that does not sound like, the full truth. I guess both things could be true. But Tony Khan made the decision a lot easier for her because apparently he had no interest in re-signing her to begin with. This is what he said. The top 2 AEW executives are brown. Me and Mega, who is the SVP and Chief Legal Officer for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and she works for AEW as well. Jade, Bowens, Caster, Dante, Nyla, Isaiah, and Marquand all won on TV this month. TBS title tournament has been very diverse. I let Swole's contract expire as I felt her wrestling wasn't good enough. Hashtag AEW Rampage, street fight tonight. Got to get that little bit of promotion in there right at the very end. If Tony Khan was upset by what Big Swole had to say and disagreed with it, there is a right way to respond to it. This was not that way. He's trying to be Dana White. Dana White can be Dana White because that's just who he is, and he always comes off like an asshole whenever he talks. Tony Khan has built up all of this goodwill with his audience and a lot of wrestling fans and the way that he, handles things and, bringing in all of this talent and putting together a lot of these dream matches that people have been talking about and trying to be the anti-WWE. He has built up has been trying to build up all of this goodwill. And then he goes out and he responds and reacts in the way that he did. The Dana White look is not a good look for Tony Khan. This was the worst possible way to respond to this because what he did was turn it into a gigantic story that has been trending ever since. And it's all anybody was talking about is how poorly he came off, and it turned into a debate about Tony Khan. Was he right? Was he wrong to say what he did in the way that he did? Him saying that Big Swole as a wrestler wasn't very good and her skills were not up to snuff is perfectly fine if that's how he feels. And Big Swole was not the best in that women's division. Not even close. And Tony obviously felt the same way, except in that media scrum after the Revolution pay-per-view last March, he said the exact opposite. He said Big Swole is a great wrestler and has a great personality. She's gotten better, he said. She's had a lot of great matches, he said. I don't know what those matches are, but that's what he said at the time. So evidently, something changed in the 7 months that followed. Let's say he changed his mind and feels the opposite now. Maybe he felt she wasn't progressing enough. Let's just say. He's got to recognize that this woman is addressing some issues that are important to her, and if she feels that way, there's a pretty damn good chance there are other people in that company who feel the same way. Now, they may not feel as comfortable as she is going out and talking about it publicly, especially if they're still under contract and she's not. She's free, so she's got nothing to worry about now. She can pretty much say whatever she wants without fear of, it blowing back on her. But you have to imagine that there are probably at least a few other people, if not maybe several people, who work for Tony Khan who might feel the same way. She might not be the only one. She is relaying her experiences in the company. If she feels there is a lack of structure behind the scenes, that's a perfectly valid critique. All this does, the way that he responded and sticking that last line in there, is make him come off like he's just dismissing everything that she just said. We've got lots of diversity. She sucked in the ring, and don't forget to watch Rampage tonight. What he did is potentially piss off a whole bunch of people who work for him. And Lio Rush was one of those people. He was very upset. He called on Tony Khan to apologize. Now, Tony Khan does not have to apologize for thinking that Big Swole sucks as a wrestler if that's how he feels. But, again, it feels like he just threw that jab in there because somebody criticized him and he got very defensive. And it's not the first time that we have seen him react in a very defensive way to criticism. There was an article on the Fox website, either Fox or FoxNews.com, whatever it was, that made mention, I think, of, it might have been the Jaguars and some of the Khan family, sports entities, that lumped AEW in there, and I think either the insinuation or what was said was that their ratings are down. And so it's this random writer on a website talking about this, and Tony Khan came back at Fox News, at Fox News, he tagged him on Twitter, and he came back with 4 Nielsen charts with demos and numbers, and it's like, what are you doing? None of this is necessary at all. You're giving a voice to these outlets that's just going to amplify them. If you think they're wrong and you don't like what they're saying, the best thing that you could do is just leave it alone. Or wait until you're on Sirius. He's got a spot every single week, at least one day a week, I know. I think every Wednesday. Right? Is it Wednesday or Friday? He's on Busted Open Radio. Right? Don't they call it Tony Time or something? I mean, he's got a forum. There's a time and a place where he can address these. And this is the problem a lot of people get into when they try to tweet stuff out in a very limited number of characters. It's very hard sometimes to get your point across, and it's why there's a lot of stuff I wait until the Sunday podcast to talk about. There are things I'd love to go and tweet about when news breaks during the week, and I sometimes have to pull myself back and say, I can't say what I want to say in 240 characters. Or I'll say it and it'll come across wrong. I'll wait until Sunday and I'll speak it. I'll be able to better articulate what I'm trying to say. People will hear my voice and the way that I'm talking about it, and that can make all the difference in the world. Things sometimes on social media, they just get lost in translation. There was no good reason for him to go off half-cocked the way that he did. It was a no-win situation for him. And it completely overshadowed whatever points, valid points, he was trying to make. And it took attention away from that very violent, very bloody street fight on Rampage. Because those 4 women went in there and they fucking worked their asses off. And I thought that was very unfair to them. Now, the next day, Lio Rush posted a follow-up statement saying that he and Tony Khan had spoken privately. This is what he had to say. I want this to be clear. I do not consider this to be a diversity issue, and I at no point have thought or said that AEW or Tony are racist. We could all clearly see that wrestling as a whole and the AEW roster is perpetually diverse. The issue at hand was a racial insensitivity issue. Having spoken to Tony and Mega, we have discussed the endeavors to further understand the struggles of the black community. I am grateful to be able to understand more about Tony and and Mega, their own ethnic backgrounds, and glad that they are actively seeking input from an African American perspective. I am proud to work for a boss and company that try to make these strides in social equality. I look forward to working with Tony to keep making steps towards positive change. I pray that 2022 is a year of positive change in all aspects. So they got together privately, which is how this probably should have been dealt with in the first place. They got together privately and hashed it out, and that's good. He had to do something. The last thing you want is a small rebellion in your locker room. Because the one thing AEW has going for it, it seems, is that they have a pretty harmonious locker room. I mean, there could be underlying issues that we're not aware of, and I'm sure there's always issues, but you hear about what a family it is and what a loose environment it is, and people can express themselves creatively, and people are just generally happier. The people who have jumped from WWE to AEW seem to like the environment and the atmosphere a lot more. The last thing you want to do is fuck with that. So Tony Khan, as the head of this company, had to do something to put this shit to bed. But it's a mess that he caused himself. It's not Big Swole's fault. Big Swole was well within her rights to go on her show and say the things that she said. She doesn't work for them anymore. It's her podcast. So the issue is not in what Swole said, that she didn't have the right to say it. She absolutely does. The issue that I can understand Tony being upset about is this idea that AEW is not diverse. They are absolutely diverse. There are a lot of talents from a lot of different backgrounds who look different in many ways, who come from different ethnic backgrounds, people of all races and nationalities that have had roles on television and been champions in that company. Maybe Big Swole is upset that there hasn't been a black world champion yet in AEW. I think in time there will be, I'm sure. But right now, the stars are the ones who are in those positions. And I look ahead in the year 2022 and I see people like MJF and I see people like Malachi Black and even people like Bryan Danielson and CM Punk. Those are the people who are going to be in that spot. Wardlow is another one who I think is going to explode as a babyface onto the scene in 2022. And I wouldn't want anybody saying, oh, well, Wardlow shouldn't get the spot because he's white. To me, it's, when it comes to who's the world champion in AEW or in WWE, it shouldn't be about who's black and who's white, who looks like this, who looks like that. It's giving those people opportunities to succeed and to get themselves over. And if they get over at that level, then by all means, put the belt on them like they did with Big E. Now, Big E ended up having a very uneventful run in WWE, and that wasn't really entirely his fault. But Big E is somebody who I was waiting a long time for him to get that big push. And I was very happy when he won the Money in the Bank, and he went on and he won the championship. It's not the way that I would have done it, but he did go on to become WWE champion. Look at Bobby Lashley. Look at the year that Bobby Lashley had. He had the best year of his entire life. He's been around for a while. And finally, they figured out what to do with Bobby Lashley. The guy's a fucking destroyer. He's also a freak athlete. He's already in his mid to late 40s, but he's doing the best work of his career. That man is a world champion. He's been a world champion. He will be a world champion again because he earned it. Now in AEW, they have people like a Powerhouse Hobbs, who I think one day may get to that level. He ain't there yet. And I don't want him there just because of the way that he looks. I want him there when the time is right for him to be a world champion. So I don't have any issue with people like Kenny Omega and Hangman Page or MJF if he gets the belt next being a champion. Those are the people right now at this moment who should be in those spots. There's a lot of young talent also being promoted in that company. And a lot of really quality African-American talent as well, who I think one day are going to become big stars. It's not just about Jungle Boy and Darby Allin. You've got people like Dante Martin and Powerhouse Hobbs. And clearly they see things in people like Lee Moriarty and Lee Johnson. Jade Cargill may be the TBS champion in the next few days. She is absolutely a star. The first day I looked at that woman, I said, this woman is a fucking star. That's the kind of person that I'm sure AEW would love to at some point build their women's division around. Now, she's still very green and inexperienced, but she'll get there. I don't even know that I would put the belt on her this week. I'd rather it go on Ruby Soho, but if not this week, she will get there. But Tony Khan getting upset because somebody says the company is not diverse enough, you know what? He has a right to be upset about that because I think that is an unfair criticism. But that's how she feels. And he just, in one line, he completely negated all of that other stuff by putting the line in there about how I don't think she's a very good wrestler. It doesn't matter if it's true. You have to be smart enough in the position that he's in to know when to shut up and when to walk away, when the time is right and when the time is not right to make a comment like that. He shot himself in the foot. It was an unforced error. It didn't have to happen. And so he had a very shitty start to his new year.